Hey and welcome. I'm super excited. We're here with Alyssa Althouse today, and we're talking about reading, reading, reading. I'm very excited about this because I was an English teacher, high school English teacher. And when I started homeschooling, the one thing that I was the most unprepared for and the most nervous about was teaching my kid how to read. Oh my gosh, because I never taught anybody how to read before. They were high schoolers. By the time they got to me, they already knew how to read. Or if they didn't, they weren't in my class. So it was something that I didn't have to deal with. And all my teacher friends were like, oh, you know, this such and such, and you know, this such and this exam and this, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, I don't know anything like that. And so I got a lot of tips from my teacher friends, but I still was very unprepared. And I know that if I knew how the brain worked, how people acquired language, how things really happened in a specific order, the sequencing of all that, it would have really helped me to understand just how to put it all together and what indicators to look for if things were not going right or something like that. And luckily for me, my son was a very early reader. He was reading pretty much by the time he was 4 and a half. But that is not always the case. And there's plenty of kids that don't read until later. And it's okay. It's okay. But we're going to tell you, Alyssa is going to tell you some indicators about what to look for, things to know where the sequencing of what they should be, how they should be acquiring language. And guess what? How we can actually teach it so that we feel confident to do so, because I know that's one thing that a lot of parents really struggle with. And it's something that if we have the if we have kids that are neurodivergent or kids that are struggling, we absolutely don't know what to do from there. And you're not alone, because most people don't. And I guess the teachers don't either. So it's something that Alyssa does a lot, was just help families through the system and through the school system, help them navigate and get resources. But ultimately, our system is not designed to help kids with dyslexia and with a lot of reading struggling readers. So we want to make sure that we are prepared and we know what's going on too. So Alyssa, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. You have been such a wonderful connection that we've gotten to know each other a little bit more throughout the last several months here. And I'm very excited to share with you today, that to share everyone with you today. And so Alyssa, can you share a little bit about why you're so excited about reading? I mean, it is a foundation for sure. And I feel like you definitely, out of I know a lot of reading tutors, and you have a really great calm sense of what we should be doing and when to do it and why we're doing it and how it works. And that is something that a lot of reading tutors don't know. They know certain things about, like, okay, this is if you're struggling here, you can try to this. But you have a really great grasp on the science of it. And I really want to dig into that today. But why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah, good question. It's a lot to cover maybe in 30 minutes, but I will do my best.
Absolutely. I think we just lost Alyssa for a second there, but we'll bring her back on. Oh, there she is. There she is.
I don't know what happened. Okay.
It's
You
all
can hear
good.
me? You can see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good old tech. All right. um, all right. So let me just begin by telling kind of what I do, what my job is, and where I came from. So I've been in education for over 20 years now, and my roots were really in preschool teaching. So I taught preschool for many years, which was a great place to start because that's when we're teaching foundational reading skills. So I loved having that background in phonics, and it's really carried me throughout my career and my journey here. So, but when I started getting into public education, it was sort of the height of the reading wars. So I don't know if you're familiar with the reading wars, but there was a lot of sort of battling and happening about what is the best way to teach reading. So when I first started in my student teaching in a second grade classroom, I was teaching with a scripted curriculum. So that meant it was like here's exactly what you say, exactly what you teach, what all the kids are doing at exactly the same time. And then when I've got my first job, it was complete opposite. So I started working at a school that used balanced literacy in this sort of like fantastical way of learning reading, and there was a lot of autonomy. So I got to experience two very different ways of teaching reading. And I think that started me off being very just passionate about how do kids learn to read? What is the best way to teach reading? And unfortunately, like some of that came from some trial and error. I got to see things that weren't working. And with my second grade students, I saw how important, especially at that age, like reading is regardless of the subject, right? The area, subject area. So kids were, if you can't read, you're also going to be struggling in math. How can you read the word problems, right? So super passionate about literacy because it is a life skill and it's something we need for all kinds of learning in every area.
Absolutely. It is a foundational skill for sure. And it's a foundational skill to help our brain start thinking too. And that's one of the things we've talked about a lot with in brain health and in how it's tied to education too, which I really love. And so and I know we've had the reading wars of the whole language versus phonics and all the things. But when you're thinking about the science, like how reading actually works, how we acquire language, what's happening in the brain, all those things, like what can you walk us through a little bit about how that works in just a general sense?
Yeah. I think the first important point to make is that our brains are not have not evolved for reading. So it is not something that we are just born being able to do. It's not a natural thing, right? Humans have been speaking for over like 500,000 years, but we've only been reading because humans invented print to communicate more efficiently. We've only been using written language for about 5,000 years. So we just haven't caught up evolutionarily to be able to read naturally, right? So there are actually parts of our brain that we need to connect that were never meant to connect. We have to rewire our brain literally to be able to read and make sense of this print system that was invented. So we have to repurpose parts of our brain. And I think that's so important to understand because it shows us that we need to be explicit and intentional when we're teaching reading. We can't just expect it to happen through osmosis any more than, we can't expect a child just to listen to the piano and then all of a sudden know how to play it, right? Whereas speech, we think of reading as maybe a form of speech, and it kind of is, but we have evolved to be able to speak. So our brains are kind of come preloaded and pre-wired for speech, but not reading. But there is a YouTube video by Dr. Stanislas Duhan called How the Brain Learns to Read. It's a fabulous quick little resource if anyone wants to geek out with us and learn more about it.
I love that stuff. Oh my gosh, I need to listen to that. That's so cool. And I never heard that before. That's such a good point, though. It really is something that's very recent for us and something that we have to consider in the way that we teach that. That's so fascinating. I absolutely love that. That makes so much sense. And I know that. When we're thinking about we like everybody should just know how to read. I mean, that's something that we should just naturally do, but it is something we have to be intentional about. And some of the things I think we think when we're homeschool parents, we think, okay, well, the teachers, they know how to teach reading. So, when we're homeschooling, gosh, I'm not sure how to do that. What what things should they feel what things should they already understand about the way that we can teach kids how to read that classroom teachers already understand, or maybe even that they don't?
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And I love teachers. My husband's in public education. I have many friends who are teachers. They are just the heart and glue of the school system. Sometimes they're running on fumes, and sometimes they
Right.
aren't given the training, right? And so we're really also looking at not only teacher training, but even starting at the colleges that are training teachers in the first place to
Yes.
be up to date with the research and what's the best way to teach reading. So I think you are at an advantage as a homeschool parent, especially because
Woohoo.
you already sort of know your child. They know, you know their interests, you know what they like, and that can help you also get them excited about learning and the things that they're reading about, and they trust you, and all of that is so just important in that process, because learning to read is hard and it's vulnerable. We're trying something and that's really difficult and cognitively demanding, right? So having that trust is such a good first step.
I know. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, yeah.
I was just listening to one of your reels on Instagram, and I was listening to how you were talking about the reading aloud being such an important part of the learning to read process. And I talk about this all the time, read alouds, especially when before they're actually reading aloud to them. What do you think about that as part of how it helps the reading process?
Yeah, I think that we can't rely solely on read alouds, right?
Right.
Just like we can't just play the piano for a kid and expect them to learn how to play it, but they're going to have the appreciation for it. They're going to develop, maybe some things about tone and melody and all of those things, right? And maybe a love for it. So the role that read alouds really play is, yeah, it's, encouraging that love of reading and storytelling, and that connection that comes with it is so valuable. But more than that, we are developing vocabulary, we're developing oral language when we're reading out loud. We're giving our children that understanding of the goal, like the role of reading, right? It's to learn something or for enjoyment, and they're learning about story structure. There's so many benefits of reading out loud. It's a really rich experience. And in fact, I know we were going to talk about this later, but I think I'll plug it in now.
Go for it.
There's some sort of newish research out there that came out of Harvard about early identification and support being so crucial. So some research that came out recently shows reading struggles don't just suddenly appear, right? Like sometimes we think they're like
Mm.
suddenly pop up at like first grade or second grade, but that's kind of just when maybe we're noticing them, or maybe it becomes more obvious. But this new research shows that as early as 18 months, we might start noticing these struggles. And so that early identification, but also support is important. It's essential. And the earlier we act, the better outcomes for our students. And we can actually minimize some of those struggles tremendously. So yes, trajectories can start around 18 months. And those first years of life are so important in terms of reading development. Maybe we don't think about that. But oral language development is super key in building that reading development. It's like the first step, like the ground base floor. And read alouds really help develop that too.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. I love that new research that we can do that. I want to come back to that. But right now, I'm just in my mind, I was thinking as you were talking about that, I was thinking about second language learning, as that was one of the things that I used to teach. My
Mm.
husband teaches it too. And talking about the difference is between vocabularies in acquiring vocabulary, because a lot of times some of our kids that come in as second language learners, especially if they're from other countries that didn't have a lot of schooling or didn't have a lot of academics, they don't have the language for
Mm.
the actual vocabulary to be able to, even in their own language, to access the academic words. And I was thinking about that as you were talking about vocabulary, and read alouds definitely, in your choice of read alouds, definitely help with that vocabulary and acquiring some of those words, right?
Definitely. And I want to just pause for a minute. I'm getting a notification that says I'm not being recorded. So I want to check in on your end to make sure everything looks okay.
Oh, let's see. Let's see about that. That's okay. We can keep going, because if it's streaming, then we will be fine with
Great.
the stream. So it is totally good. Thank you for
Awesome.
Thank you for notifying me about that. But
Yeah. So
so yeah,
vocabulary, I think, yes, definitely for lingual learners is super important. But any child, the role of vocabulary, and not only vocabulary, but knowledge, building knowledge in our children. So that can come from read alouds, watching documentaries, going on outings, experiencing the world, conversing. That vocabulary and knowledge building is huge in setting up our kids for reading success. Because if you think about it, if I gave you a manual on, open heart surgery or something that you know nothing about, I'm assuming you don't, maybe you do. There would be words in there. There would be descriptions about things that you have never heard about, that you have
right.
no knowledge about. So going through that and reading it is going to be very challenging. It's going to take you a long time. You might not even understand half of it, right? So when our child gets to a story that they're reading, and if they don't have that background knowledge, they don't have the vocabulary that goes with the topic or academic language, being able to just code and understand what they're reading is going to be that much more difficult. So
Absolutely.
read alouds play great. Yeah. In that
Yeah, they're
moment.
so important for a lot of other reasons. There's connection and discussion and all the sharing of family stories, the reminiscing, and also thinking. Like they're seeing you think through things and with your discussions. Super, super important. It's one of my favorite things, actually. But
Oh, yes. It's such a great bonding and connection. I mean, I'm
yeah.
sad to hear. I heard some statistics out there that like Gen Z parents have, said that reading to their kids feels like a chore and it's boring. And
Oh,
so as much as I think reading out loud is important, I don't want it to feel like this, burden, and it shouldn't feel like that for our kids either. It really should be something that feels enjoyable and a time for connection. So we also don't want to overthink it either.
100%. I love that. I love that perspective because it can sometimes, if we're just like, oh, we have to get through it, it should never be like that. And you guys know that I'm not like that. So, what we want to do is create positive learning experiences always. And I know Alyssa's about that too. So, when we're creating and we're picking our choice of books, hey, man, Shel Silverstein's awesome. Let's start there. Let's start with some fun stuff, easy stuff. Let's get the love and the routines down, and then you can go from there. And I know I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying before about the early defining of reading struggles, because I know that for a lot of us, that is the case where our kids are maybe quote unquote behind, although you know how I feel about that. And then also, some when they are identified, that thinking about how we can do that earlier is really important. So do you have any information about what are some of the things we can look for, like 18 months to a couple years?
Yeah, so we're starting to really understand that those things can pop up really early, and it doesn't mean that we need to like hit the panic button or freak out, but we should be intervening properly and supporting our kids, and getting them off to a strong start. We can change their trajectory. So some things to look at, are they having difficulties with things like labeling or categorizing, maybe rhyming, learning and remembering letter names or letter sounds, um, or like retrieving words, like like those kids that just say stuff and thing all the time. Like they can't think of the word. Like if you're noticing that a lot, that can be a little bit of a red flag. Any delayed speech is also something to make sure that you're supporting or getting supports for as early as possible.
Yeah, that was something I saw a lot when I was teaching high school, was the thing and the stuff and the it seems like
Mm.
we just have to teach them how to identify that, and if or just encourage them to think, what kind of stuff are you talking about? What is the thing that we're talking about
Yeah.
here?
Yes, it is also a learned skill for sure.
Yeah.
That takes practice. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love
Yeah.
that idea of thinking of the labeling and the categorizing, things like that are very important early skills, and you can definitely
Mhm.
identify those. I remember my son was really good at he's still good at memorizing things. It's like wacky, but he memorizes stuff. And we have this one video of him saying, it's it was a dinosaur thing, and it was an audio that was electronic book or something. And he says Coelophysis was a skilled dinosaur. Like he's this whole thing, and he'd memorized it. And it was really interesting seeing him do that, and then how that related to his reading. But his writing did not match with that initially.
Mhm.
So he was a horrible speller. I was all the time like, okay, I'm sounding the letter out. We literally have it on the wall, like we're pointing, like all the things. And I would sound out the word, and he just couldn't grasp the letters for a while. And that's
Mhm.
he's since been able to figure that out now. But that's something was a disconnect for me. Was he was this massive reader. He could read so great, and then but the writing, and I know that's something that you do too, is you focus on you have a little bit about handwriting and how that helps with the reading. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the main sort of focus here should be that we always want to be integrating skills.
Yeah.
So we should kind of avoid trying to do too many things in isolation, because that's not really how the brain works when we're reading and when we're writing. There's a lot of things that have to come together and work together, right? So yeah, handwriting is definitely a big foundational skill, and it's really powerful in not just like learning letter names, letter sounds, being able to write fluently and easily. That helps with our, writing composition as well. But the research shows, like neuroscientists even recently have done studies where when we are writing by hand, there are parts of our brain that are just light up like crazy. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of activity happening, like things bouncing all around. We get this sort of party hat action in our brain when we're writing by hand. Whereas when we're typing, it's completely flat. And that kind of makes sense, because no matter what letter you're touching, you're just doing the same thing, right? With handwriting is this enriching, like cognitive task that we don't know exactly why, but lights up areas of our brain that are responsible for reading too. So it's just a really good activity to practice handwriting formation in the correct way. It's more than just pretty penmanship. So it's definitely a big bang for your buck skill. And then we also want to incorporate that handwriting, again, integrating those skills when we're spelling, when we're writing, making sure we're using proper handwriting formation. We're saying the sounds of the letters as we write them. So incorporating all those skills. But spelling definitely does lag behind reading, and that's very common. And the reason that happens is, it kind of makes sense if you think about it, that when you're reading, you kind of just picking up what's there. But when you're writing, you have this sort of blank slate, and you have to fill in the gaps, right? You have to remember the letter sequences, the sounds, the spellings, all of those things. So it does typically lag behind. But when you are spelling, you are actually helping learn to read as well, because if you can spell it, you can read it. But
Absolutely.
it's not the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's such a
Yeah.
good point. And I love that we're talking about this too, because there's actually a lot of cognitive skills that go into writing. And like you said, that party hat goes on. And it's so, I think it's a really great idea. And I always talk about this all the time. Our brains are not designed to learn things separately in little, like, okay,
Mhm.
history, math, like all the things separate. Our brains are designed to have a goal and then learn everything that we need to learn around that goal. And so
Mhm.
that's a really interesting way to put it into the reading aspect. I think that that's really important for us to understand, is that doing all the things together is really important to supporting that skill. And being that we're talking about just supporting the skill, what are some of the things I want to get to, some actual practical things that parents can do to help their kids in this initial stage, to help their kids learn how to read?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are a few things that I would definitely recommend, but if you want to learn more, you can also, I have a blog with some more about this information as well. And I love how you said it's about the brain too. So it's not just, the science of reading and how reading develops, but it's really important to know the science of learning too.
Yes.
How the brain best stores information and retrieves information and learns information. So there is a book, another recommendation, called Make It Stick by Peter Brown et al. And it's all about science-backed learning strategies, which I think anybody who's educating anybody could benefit from checking that out as well. So recommendation. A few activities when you're just getting started. Of course, we know reading out loud is so beneficial. So do those read aloud, stick with those. But we also want to make sure that we're teaching letter sounds. There might be a little misunderstanding or even a debate about, do I teach letter names? Do I teach letter sounds? And we can learn the alphabet song, and we can, put things in ABC order, maybe, have an ABC puzzle. Those are all great. However, it's those letter sounds that contribute to being able to read. We need to be able to look at the visual representation in that letter form and know that there's a sound that's associated with it. Unfortunately, in English, many sounds that are associated with it, because one sound can be spelled many ways in English, and one spelling can represent different sounds. So it is very complex. But we want to teach those sounds. And like I said, coming back to integrating those skills. So my favorite way to teach letter sounds is not through like flashcards or pointing to a letter and saying the sound, but it's actually through the work of building words. And that maybe sounds advanced, but I do this with kids as young as 3, and they're able to do it. So they don't even have to know all their letter sounds to be able to start building words. And that helps the learning stick. It's in context, and it's helping them build those reading skills while simultaneously learning those letter sounds. So I'll give you an example. If you have the word cat, you're building the word cat, you put up the letters that represents the sounds in the word cat. So we have a k, a, and a t, or a letter C, a letter A, and a letter T. So you kind of put those up. Maybe you have some letter tiles or magnetic letters. You can use that. If you don't, just grab a Post-it and write a C, an A, and a T. And then you're going to go ahead and mix those up, and you're going to draw little, what I call parking spots for each sound in the word below. So you might say, you might call it a parking spot. I like that analogy. Like sounds are like parking spots for letters. So you make a little line, you say k, at, and then you're going to ask the child to pull down the letter that represents that sound. So we're going to build the word cat. And you point to the first line. The first sound is k. And they might grab the wrong letter because they're just learning their letter sounds, and that's okay. They grab the letter A, and you say, oh, that spells ah. We're looking for the letter that spells k. And so it's sort of like this process of elimination maybe in the beginning.
Yeah,
But that's okay. They're learning letter sounds while building the word. So you want them to say the sound as they pull down the letter. So they say k, and then they pull down the ah, and then they pull down the t. Oh, we built the word cat. So you're kind of teaching the knowledge. Part of reading is knowledge. So knowing that letters represent sounds, but also the skill of segmenting those sounds and blending those sounds together to form a word. So you're teaching a lot. It's big bang for your buck in this one little activity that feels so simple, but it's going to be really impactful. And I do have a resource on my website. I call it Say in Park, if anybody's interested in that too. But that's one of my favorite activities for when you're just getting started, as young as 2, 3, even little ones can participate in that.
I love that activity because it's not just about reading skills and letter sounds, but it's also about spelling. You're getting in spelling in there too. So you're getting a lot of action you're getting for that one little activity. It's so
Yeah.
great.
And
It
what we
reminds
call
me of
phonemic awareness too. They're building so many skills at once. So
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of Boggle Junior. It reminds me of like how
Mhm.
that we used to have the parking spaces for those letters
Oh yeah, yeah.
and the little dice. It's so cute. I love it. And you can use stuff like that. You can use and if you don't need flashcards necessarily, you don't want to do on a piece of paper, you can use those little letter die and
Mhm.
have those in the little spaces on the game.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many different fun ways that you can do that. I know Alyssa's so super amazing at that. And I am really excited about this conversation because I feel like we've run the gamut of like science. We've also talked about, practical strategies. And then we've also talked about some research that's come out about how we can identify these things. And I know we talked a lot about dyslexia last time I had a guest on. So 2 weeks
Mhm.
ago, we had a guest talking about dyslexia. And just real quick, because I know we only have a few minutes left, but when do you think it's appropriate for people to need to learn to, or need to start seeking out outside help if they are
Mm.
struggling?
Well, I think there's more than one right answer to that.
Yeah.
Some parents come to me because they're just like, I just want to be mom, and I don't, I'm having we're butting heads at this. So like, can you just take over?
Yeah.
And that's totally reasonable too. Like sometimes there's just something, where you want help because it's a better fit. I think this is a tricky one because, there is some information about, there's no hurry, there's no rush. Some people might feel that way. But I think if we're noticing that learning letter sounds, blending sounds together, segmenting sounds, when we're noticing that those things are a challenge and they continue to be a challenge, even though we're getting a lot of practice and a lot of repetition in the right ways, you need to do something immediately. So either educate yourself and get more tools and resources, so you can feel empowered to make sure that you're supporting your kiddo, or seek out services from a professional. That being said, not all approaches are created equal. I use structured linguistic phonics, or a speech to print approach, which I find through my many years of being in education, and I've tried a lot of different things, I found that to be the most efficient and effective approach. So yeah, seeking out help, but making sure you're getting the right kind. And it's never too late too. If your child's struggling second, third, fourth, fifth grade, just do what you got to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if your kids are struggling right now, it might be a good idea. And your kids are later, in third, fourth, fifth grade, it might be a great idea to get some extra help. Or definitely at least read the books that Alyssa's talking about, and then seek out more information about that, because it's really important for our kids' level of learning and their confidence level to be able to see themselves as people who can read. I'm not smart thing. We don't want that in there at all. We want our kids to have really high confidence and to know that they can overcome the struggles, and we can help them with that. So
reading is such a crucial skill. And, we do want to start building those foundations early while that brain is still squishy and excited to learn, and willing to try things over and over and over again, right? So the earlier we kind of start with some of those foundational skills, we can make it fun, and we can make it a time of connection and enjoyment. But we want to start as early as possible. Yeah,
absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And then we can build our love of learning on top of that. So, and keep it going, because they already have it in their squishy brains. I like squishy brains. That's super cute.
Yes. I wish I could be everybody's tutor. If you can figure out how I can be everyone's tutor, let me know. But
I agree. I think you should as well. And so how can we get in touch with you, Alyssa? I know you have a freebie for us today. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then how we can reach you?
Yeah, I created a little flow chart in which hopefully that can help you pinpoint, if you are noticing some struggle, sort of pinpoint where that breakdown is. And then it gives you activities to specifically target that need, so that you can be really intentional and zone in on it. So it's a little flow chart, can kind of go and see where is my child struggling, and then you get to find that activity that will support them specifically. So happy to help people in that way.
Yeah, you can find the link for that wherever you're watching or listening to this. And wow, that's a huge resource. That gives a lot of confidence right there, if we can pinpoint what's actually going on. So that's super valuable. Thank you so much for that. And I know, where can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me, more information on my website, which is just learnwithalyssa.net. I'm also on socials, Learn with Alyssa. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, just shoot them my way. I'm super happy to help. And I know you're a great resource too. Kimmy is fabulous.
Yeah, I send people to Alyssa all the time. I'm like,
Same.
Alyssa will know the answer to this question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alyssa. That is so
course.
amazing. I know this is really, really valuable, and something that parents will want to listen to over and over again, especially for all the resources that you shared with us today. And be sure to grab that flow chart. Be sure, if this resonated with you, to like and subscribe, and share this with somebody who needs it. We have all kinds of friends in all different places of homeschooling, and littles to upper elementary, whatever the case. If they're struggling with reading, if they're teaching reading, if there's any kind of idea on like how we need to improve reading, then please do share this with them. I would really appreciate it. And also, I know that they would appreciate that information. That was really going to help them. So thank you so much, guys. I will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.